Hansel and Gretel. Once in a small cottage by a deep forest lived a woodcutter with his 2 children, Hansel and Gretel. Times grew hard and bread became scarce on the table. The woodcutter worried day and night about how to feed his family. His new wife spoke coldly. "There is not enough for all of us." Hansel heard these words and comforted Gretel. "Don't be afraid. I will look after you." That night, under a silver moon, Hansel slipped outside and filled his pockets with small white pebbles. Before dawn, the woodcutter led the children into the forest to gather wood. As they walked, Hansel dropped the pebbles one by one along the path. Deeper and deeper they went, until the trees stood like tall, quiet guards. Their father built a small fire and said, "Rest here while I work." The children waited and waited, but the woodcutter did not return. Gretel began to cry softly. Hansel took her hand and pointed to the pale stones gleaming like stars. By moonlight, they followed the shining trail all the way home. Their father embraced them with tears of relief. But the hard days did not end, and bread was still short. Again, the stepmother urged the father to take the children into the forest. Hansel went to gather pebbles at night, but the door had been locked. In the morning, Hansel crumbled a slice of bread into tiny pieces and tucked them in his pocket. As they walked, he dropped the crumbs behind them, hoping to mark the way. They went deeper than before, where the forest was thick and still. Again their father built a small fire and told them to rest. When evening fell, the children rose to follow the trail, but the crumbs were gone. Birds had eaten every last piece. They wandered through the dark trees, holding hands and singing softly to keep up their courage. At dawn, a sweet smell drifted through the air, warm like a bakery. Following the scent, they found a little house made of bread, cakes, and sugar window panes. "We must be careful," said Gretel. "But I am so hungry." They broke off a tiny piece and tasted it, just enough to ease their hunger. Suddenly the door opened, and an old woman peered out, leaning on a stick. "Dear children," she said sweetly, "come inside and rest." The little house was warm, and a delicious meal waited on the table. But the old woman was not kind. She was a witch who lured hungry travelers. In the morning, her voice turned sharp, and she shut Hansel in a sturdy little pen. "Fatten up, boy," she said. and you, girl, do the work." Gretel pretended to be meek, but she watched and waited for a chance. Each day the witch asked Hansel to hold out a finger so she could check if he was growing strong. Hansel, clever and calm, held out a thin little twig instead. The witch squinted and grumbled, for her eyes were poor and the twig felt small. Impatient at last, she lit the oven and told Gretel to check if it was hot enough. Gretel understood the danger and said, "I do not know how to look inside." "Foolish child," snapped the witch. "Watch me." She bent forward to peer into the oven's mouth. Quick as a breath, Gretel stood firm and closed the heavy door. The latch clicked, and the danger passed like a storm blowing by. Gretel ran to free Hansel, and the brother and sister embraced with joy. They searched the little house and found chests of bright jewels instead of bread. "Take some," said Hansel, "so we can help Father when we return." Gretel filled her apron, and Hansel filled his pockets. They left the sugar house behind and followed the bird song through the trees. Soon they came to a wide river, bright as a ribbon of sky. A gentle duck ferried them across on its sturdy back, first Gretel, then Hansel. On the other side, the forest thinned, and the path grew familiar. At last they saw their little cottage and ran to the door. Their father rushed out and gathered them in his arms, weeping with joy. The hard-hearted stepmother was gone, and peace returned to the house. Hansel and Gretel poured the jewels on the table, and there was no more hunger. They shared their good fortune with their father and remembered to be wise and kind. From then on, they kept one another safe, and the forest felt friendly again. And if ever they smelled warm bread, they smiled and gave thanks for home. Good night. From Safira Dreams. May your dreams be filled with wonder, and may every story bring peace. Safira Dreams. Where stories become dreams.